Somewhere in the west of Ireland, on a night when the wind had gone completely still, a farmer stopped dead in his tracks on the road home. He had heard something, not the cry of an owl, not the wail of a fox, not anything he could name or explain away. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, high and hollow, and filled with a grief so ancient it felt older than the hills themselves. He ran home, bolted the door, and sat trembling by the fire. By morning, his father was dead. Welcome, friends, to a story that has haunted the Irish imagination for over 1,000 years. Tonight, we follow the Banshee, the spirit who does not kill, does not threaten, does not bargain. She simply knows, and when she opens her mouth to cry, someone is already beyond saving. Before we go any further, if you find yourself drawn into this world of ancient sorrow and spectral warning, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this one take deep research and genuine love for the strange and the sacred, and your support makes it all possible. Now, let us walk together into the dark. The word Banshee comes from the old Irish words meaning woman of the fairy mound. In the oldest layers of Irish belief, the fairy mounds were not whimsical places, full of dancing lights. They were the burial places of the ancient dead, the thresholds between the living world and whatever lay beyond it. The beings who inhabited those spaces were not small and gentle. They were powerful, unpredictable, and deeply connected to the fate of human bloodlines. The Banshee was one of those beings, and she was attached not to a place but to a family, a specific family. Your family, if your blood ran old enough and Irish enough to have earned her terrible attention. This is what made the Banshee so uniquely terrifying. She was not a random monster lurking in the wilderness. She was personal. She belonged to you, the way a shadow belongs to its owner. And just as you cannot outrun your shadow, you could not escape her cry when it came. So why did people fear her so deeply? Why did entire communities fall silent when someone claimed to have heard that sound in the night? The answer lies in the peculiar nature of her role. Most supernatural creatures in world mythology either cause harm or can be defeated. The vampire can be repelled, the demon can be exorcised, the witch can be unmasked. But the Banshee does none of those things. She does not cause the death she announces. She simply perceives it, in the way that certain animals sense an earthquake before it arrives. Her cry is not a curse, it is a truth, and there are few things more frightening than a truth you cannot change. Now, where did she come from? How did this extraordinary figure enter the Irish imagination and take root so deeply that her echo can still be felt today? There are several compelling possibilities, and each one opens a different window into the ancient Irish world. The oldest explanation reaches back to the pre-Christian spiritual landscape of Ireland, a world populated by the Tuatha De Danann, the divine race who ruled Ireland before the coming of mortals. When the Tuatha De Danann were eventually defeated and driven underground, they did not disappear. They became the Aos Si, the people of the mounds, supernatural beings who continued to exist alongside the human world, invisible but present, powerful but hidden. Among these beings were figures who served as guardians of specific noble bloodlines. The Banshee, in this reading, is one such guardian, a supernatural woman bound by ancient compact to a human family, mourning their losses because she has watched over them for so long that their grief has become her own. A second explanation focuses on a very real and very human practice from ancient Irish culture. In the old tradition of keening, women were hired or designated to mourn the dead aloud at funerals. These women, called keeners, would cry out in a stylized, ritualized wail that gave voice to the grief of the entire community. Their cries were not random, they were skilled, practiced, almost musical in their anguish. Over generations, as Christianity reshaped Irish culture and the old traditions were pushed to the margins, the memory of the Kina may have merged with older supernatural beliefs to produce the Banshee. The woman who wailed at death became, in the imagination, the woman who wailed before death. A third possibility connects the Banshee to specific figures from Irish mythology. The goddess Morrigan, one of the most complex and terrifying beings in the old Irish pantheon, was deeply associated with fate, death, and the battlefield. She could appear as a crow, a beautiful woman, or a hideous hag, and she had the power to predict who would die in battle. Some scholars see the Banshee as a diminished or localized version of this great death goddess, her cosmic power narrowed down to the scale of a single family rather than an entire war. There is also the figure of Oivel, a fairy woman of the Dalcassian clan of Munster, who was said to appear before the death of any member of that lineage. Oivel is sometimes called the first Banshee, the prototype from which all others descended. A fourth and perhaps most poignant explanation is rooted in grief itself. The Banshee, in some traditions, is the spirit of a woman who died young, often a woman who died in childbirth, or a woman who was deeply wronged in life, her sorrow so powerful that it refused to leave the world. She cries not because she has been assigned a duty, but because she cannot stop crying. She is sorrow given form, grief that has outlasted the body that produced it. In this reading, the Banshee is not a monster at all. She is a victim, and her wail is not a warning, but a lament she cannot help but repeat. Each of these origins tells us something different about how the Irish understood the relationship between the living and the dead, between the human world and the world beyond the threshold. And the Banshee, drawing from all of these streams, became something richer and stranger than any single explanation can contain. Now let us move into the stories themselves, because the legends of the Banshee are not abstract. They are vivid, specific, and often deeply moving. One of the most famous accounts involves the ancient Irish family of the O'Briens, descendants of the great High King Brian Boru. Their family Banshee was said to be Oivel herself, and the night before the Battle of Clontarf in 1014 Anno Domini, she appeared to Brian Boru and told him plainly that he would not survive the coming day. Brian Boru, a man of extraordinary courage and deep faith, reportedly received this news with calm acceptance. He went to battle anyway. He won the battle, and he died before the day was out, cut down in his tent by a fleeing enemy soldier. The Banshee had not lied. She never does. Another tale comes from the O'Neill clan of Ulster. A young man of the family, returning home from a long journey, heard a terrible wailing coming from the hills near his family's estate. He described it later as the sound of a woman weeping so hard that her whole body must have been shaking, though he could see nothing in the darkness. He arrived home to find his household in chaos. His eldest brother had collapsed without warning and died within the hour. The young man never doubted what he had heard, and for the rest of his long life he refused to travel at night. In the west of Ireland, particularly in Connacht, the Banshee was sometimes described not as a wailing woman, but as a small, hunched figure washing blood-stained clothing at a stream. This figure was called the Bean Naig, the washing woman, and she was considered even more dreadful than the wailing Banshee, because she did not merely predict death. She washed the funeral shroud of the person who was about to die. If you stumbled upon her at her work, you might catch a glimpse of the name on the shroud and know exactly who was going to be lost. Some versions of the tale say that if you were brave enough to approach the Bean Naig and ask her directly, she would answer, but the answer always came. Now, here is something worth pausing on, and I would love to know your thoughts on this in the comments below. The Banshee is one of the very few supernatural figures in any mythology who is not evil and does not cause harm, yet is universally feared. What does that tell us about human nature? Is it possible that we fear the truth more than we fear the monster? That we would rather face something we can fight than something we simply have to accept? Leave your interpretation in the comments. I read every single one. The symbolism of the Banshee runs deeper than simple death prophecy. In the Irish tradition, she was intimately connected to the concept of sovereignty, the idea that the land itself had a spiritual identity, often embodied as a woman. The ancient Irish kings did not merely rule the land. They were said to marry it, to enter into a sacred bond with the feminine spirit of the territory. When that bond was broken, when a king fell, or a noble line died out, the land itself grieved. The Banshee's cry, in this light, is not just the mourning of one woman for one family. It is the earth lamenting the loss of those who were bound to it. This is why the Banshee was specifically attached to old Irish families, families with roots deep enough to have formed that ancient bond with the land. The newly arrived, the rootless, the foreign, they did not merit a Banshee. Her attention was a mark of antiquity, of belonging so deep it had become spiritual. To have a family Banshee was, in a strange way, a point of pride. It meant your blood was old enough to matter to the other world. But here is where things become genuinely unsettling. There are accounts from the 17th and 18th centuries of multiple Banshees appearing together, their cries combining into a chorus of lamentation. This was said to happen only when someone of extraordinary greatness was about to die. A person whose loss would be felt not just by one family, but by an entire people. The death of a great poet, a beloved chieftain, a holy man of unusual power. The idea of many Banshees crying together, their individual sorrows merging into a single overwhelming sound, is one of the most haunting images in all of Irish folklore. There is also a deeply contradictory thread running through the Banshee tradition. In some accounts, she is described as beautiful, a pale and luminous woman with long silver or red hair, dressed in white or grey, her face filled not with malice, but with an almost unbearable compassion. She does not want the person to die. She mourns because she loves. In other accounts, she is a terrifying hag, hollow-eyed and wild, her face streaked with tears that have worn channels into her skin from centuries of weeping. Some traditions hold that she can appear as either, depending on the age of the person who is about to die. For the young, she appears as a young woman, grieving the life that will not be lived. For the old, she appears as a crone, ancient as they are, having watched over them for a lifetime. This duality is not a contradiction, it is a truth. Grief does not have a single face. It wears many, and it changes depending on what has been lost. The Banshee also raises a question that no tradition has ever fully resolved. If she knows who is going to die, does she know everything? Is she simply a messenger, or does she have some deeper understanding of fate itself? Some accounts suggest that the Banshee has seen the entire arc of a family's story, from its beginning to its inevitable end. She has watched generation after generation be born, live, and die, and she will continue watching until the last member of the bloodline is gone. At that point, she herself will be released, her long vigil finally over. This raises a question that is almost too large to hold. Is the Banshee a prisoner of her own loyalty? Is her endless mourning a kind of curse, not on the family she watches, but on herself? The legacy of the Banshee in the modern world is remarkable for a figure so deeply rooted in a specific cultural context. Her cry has become a universal shorthand for supernatural warning, for the voice that speaks from the edge of the known world to tell us something terrible is coming. She appears in literature, in music, in visual art, in storytelling traditions far beyond the shores of Ireland. The Irish diaspora carried her with them across the Atlantic, and in the communities of Irish immigrants in the New World, the old stories were kept alive with remarkable fidelity. People who had never seen the hills of Connacht or the bogs of Ulster still whispered about the sound their grandmother had heard the night before the old man died. What is it about the Banshee that refuses to be forgotten? Perhaps it is because she speaks to something universal, a longing we all carry, the wish that death would not come as a surprise, that someone or something in the fabric of the world would acknowledge the weight of what is being lost. The Banshee does not prevent death, but she bears witness to it. She says, with her cry, that this life mattered, that this loss is real, that the world is not indifferent to what is about to happen. In a universe that so often seems cold and silent, there is something almost comforting in the idea of a being whose only purpose is to grieve alongside you. And yet, there is one detail in the Banshee tradition that tends to stop people cold when they hear it for the first time. In some accounts, the Banshee is not heard only by the family she is attached to. She is heard by everyone nearby. The neighbors hear her. The strangers on the road hear her. The children who do not even know the family hear her. But only the family member who is about to die hears her differently. For everyone else, she is a distant wail. For that one person, she is close, intimate, almost gentle, as if she is speaking directly to them, and only them, in a language that bypasses the ears entirely and goes straight to the deepest part of the soul. No one who has heard that version of the story has ever been able to explain what it means. And perhaps that is the point. Some things are not meant to be explained. They are meant to be felt. So here we are, at the edge of the story, listening for something in the silence. The Banshee is still out there, in the old traditions and the long memory of the people who carried her across oceans and centuries. She is still attached to the ancient families, still watching, still waiting, still ready to raise her voice when the time comes. If this story moved you, if it made you look twice at the darkness outside your window, or think about the sounds you have heard in the night and chosen not to investigate, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It means the world to this work, and it helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them. Now, I want to know what you think. Which creature of myth or legend should we explore next? The wild hunt that rides across the sky? The kelpie that waits beneath the surface of still water? The striga of Eastern Europe? The undead woman who feeds on the living? Leave your suggestions in the comments and tell me what drew you to this story in the first place. Every comment is read, every voice matters, and the next great story might come from you. The wind is picking up outside, the night is deep, and somewhere, in the hills above a house where a candle still burns, a sound is rising that has no name in any modern language. But in the old tongue, they knew exactly what it was, and they knew there was nothing left to do but listen.